I'm pulling up the discussion points.
Well, it's your guys' favorite time of the week, Between Two Sheets, episode number 15. Nolan Axton here, Clay Feldner here, and Wes Mason is here, the three hacks of the Minot Curling Club. Good episode last week, guys. We had the ladies from Curl for the Cure on. That was fun to kind of recap, and what a heck of a job that they did.
Great job.
$8,400.
Yep.
For a very good cause from the first full ladies' Montsville third annual Curl for the Cure. So it was fun to talk to them. This week we got some fun stuff to talk about too.
The history we've all been waiting for.
The shirt sleeve Bonspiel is upon us, and yeah, we're going to get to that real quick. Just wanted to give you some club updates and league updates real quick. We're in the final week of league play, and we got 4 teams left for playing down for the league city championship.
Yep. So for the A, we have Grain Belt and what do we got? Grain Belt and Dirty Biters. And then we have Hofer and Drill Chem playing down.
She's going all the way. My bracket's secured. All right.
This guy just has no faith in us, eh?
Picked us to lose. We
had us out in round one.
Yeah.
So
I do want to say, too, the military championship is happening as we speak, right outside of the... We're recording in the locker room today.
From the Minot Curling Club.
Locker room.
So Rockridge Circle Dads, it's a cul-de-sac up on the Air Force Base. They all live in it. So they are competing right now for their second title. And the Dancing Lobsters are trying to steal victory from them, right from the jaws of defeat. So, yeah, it's good. I'm excited to kind of watch it on the TV back there.
A week full of good curling here. Tomorrow night is the league city championship, Wednesday the 29th. Mm-hmm. Is that the date? Yeah,
yep, that
Tuesday
is.
the 28th. And then after that wraps up, it's the weekend we've all been waiting for. And we're joined by a very special guest to kind of chat about the shirt sleeve Bonspiel and what goes on and what has gone on there. Mark Hildahl, thanks for joining us on Between Two Sheets.
Well, thank you, Nolan. It's kind of fun for me to get a chance to kind of rack my brain to kind of think about all the history of the Minot Curling Club, especially, and of course the shirt sleeve Bonspiel, which has been our tradition for 60 some years.
Yeah, right before this, we actually had to tell Mark to stop telling stories and save them for the podcast because they were all coming out too soon. Didn't want to ruin it.
I didn't ask. I think a good one. I know you've probably not curled in all of them, but have you ever missed one? Not been there at all?
When I went away to school in the 70s.
Okay, so that time frame.
So I was around in the 60s and played in those sometimes as a 7th and 8th grader, and curled all the way through high school here. I went away to school for 7 years, and during that time I did come back, I believe, once for the shirt sleeve. I came back for other Bonspiels here and there.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, we used to have 5 Bonspiels a year here, and sometimes 6. And so if it worked out for a spring break, and I think I had a team that I curled with out of the Twin Cities when I was in school there that I brought up here one weekend to curl. And so we did come back a few times, but I came back in 1978, and from that point on I've been here for all of them. I don't think I've missed any being out of town. I haven't personally curled in all of them. My curling has been curtailed the last 15 years, but prior to that I curled in all of them.
Yeah.
Yep. It's hard to curl when you're running everything.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So I guess, like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about the history. One thing I just want to start the conversation off with is it's called the shirt sleeve Bonspiel. And do you know the origins of the name and why it became the shirt sleeve spiel?
Well, originally there was 2 Bonspiels in March. It was called the International, which was a Bonspiel that the Minot Curling Club hosted from back in the 20s and 30s. So that Bonspiel was always going on in the old Minot Curling Club in here. When they first opened this club, they started the spring Bonspiel, being in the spring and getting ready for probably the golf season in spring. The shirt sleeve name came. It was actually the NSP shirt sleeve. Northern States Power, which is now XL, was a sponsor of that event. And we had several members of the Minot Curling Club who worked at NSP. And so they took it on themselves to sponsor that Bonspiel. In fact, the prizes for that Bonspiel were all electric appliances.
Hey!
And so over the years, I won electric blankets, I won toasters, I won all kinds of electric frying pans, many times I was curling with my dad and my brother, so we'd get 3 of those, whatever we won.
Just restock the house with new appliances,
well, it was
or you did your Christmas shopping.
Christmas gifts for a lot of wedding gifts and Christmas gifts were covered for a lot of years.
As an employee of a utility currently, we still give away a lot of electric appliances. It hasn't changed.
So that was the original sponsor of the event, was a NSP shirt sleeve. That's how it started. And I believe that NSP probably took care of the prizes for at least the first 10 years or so.
Sure.
In those days, all of our bonspiels had prizes that were purchased around town. And that was a big job to do that 6 times during the year, to go out and buy prizes for the 4 events that we were playing, so that really 16 teams were getting prizes to get something different every time. So they would go to sporting goods stores and all over town and buy things. In those days, Montgomery Ward, Sears were around. Those are prominent stores, J.C. Penney's. So you'd buy things, not all appliances for all the bonspiels. A lot of them were maybe dishes or whatever they could come up with to try to get appropriate prizes for all the bonspiels. And so that's the way it was for most of our bonspiels. And then starting in about 1978 or 9, I would say Morelli's, one of the beer distributors here in town, and Jerry Gooch, who was one of my best friends, and I got him curling about the time I moved back to town. We got him to start bringing down beer logoed attire, t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, and whatnot. And that was so popular. He would sell most of the prizes from the bonspiel a lot of times during the weekend. I'd make him go back to the warehouse on Sunday to get prizes to replenish what he'd been selling. And so
that happened once in my memory.
Yeah.
I can remember you set up shop over in the Holiday Inn.
Yes. So we have been able to continue the curling club through some, actually really through some pretty tough years. Morelli's were able to keep us going with prizes and providing those all through those, so at least 40 years, if not more. They've been providing the prizes for the shirt sleeve, whether it's been Morelli's themselves or Grain Belt. I think we were some other Pabst Blue Ribbon. Schmidt Light was one of the sponsors all through the year. Different beer.
Shiner.
Shiner, yeah. So anyway, they've really kept our club going through all those years.
So you mentioned a couple of tough years. Like what was kind of the bookends? What are the peak years of the club? What were the hardest years in terms of attendance?
Well, the tough years were probably in the middle to late 80s and early 90s. We were down to 50 members, maybe.
Wow.
Something like that.
Yeah, that's low.
It was really thin going. We did keep ourselves going with bonspiels then still. The history of the bonspiels, we used to typically have 48 team bonspiels, and we'd have 5 of those a year at least, and then sometimes 6, and they were waiting lists and sold out all the time. That was our limit, was 48. When I started making up the draws for the shirt sleeve back in the early 80s, curling and really it's really a demographic thing. The small towns in Canada and the small towns in North Dakota, where curling was very popular, started to die out. But up until that point, every little town in Canada had a curling club, and several little towns in North Dakota had curling clubs. And so those people were around for the winter, and they would come down here. So we had people that curled 5 bonspiels a year in Minot that lived just over the border in Canada.
Sure thing.
Very loyal folks. We had people that curled. A gentleman by the name of Ed Winkler curled here for 45 straight years in bonspiels. Another fellow, Chub Gray, from Regina, curled for at least 45 or 50 years down here, never missed a bonspiel. So we had some really loyal Canadian friends that would come down for these bonspiels. So it was very easy to fill the bonspiels. Well, some of the curling in Canada as well as the United States in the smaller towns started to be a struggle. The curling clubs were closing, the people were going south in the winter.
Things got expensive.
Things got different, yes. And so the shirt sleeve has kind of held its own all through the years. You believe it or not, you guys won't believe this, but we always had a 4-game guarantee, and the biggest number we had was 84 teams.
Holy smoke.
How many sheets of ice at the 4?
We'd have 6 sheets of ice.
We had 6 at the okay.
But we started on Thursday night, and teams would play they'd each play a game Thursday night. There'd be 2 draws on Thursday. Those same teams would come back Friday morning, play their second round, and then all the other teams would come to town. But we would have games beginning at 3 in the morning.
Beginning at 3 in the morning.
Yeah, 3 a.m.
Yeah.
draw.
So it was to get all the games in, and we were giving everybody 4-game guarantee. So that took a lot of curling and a lot of hours and a lot of work to keep the ice going, keep the place running all through those weekends. But it was our profit for the year. It kept the curling club going for quite a few years when our membership was down, our sponsorships were down, things like that.
So even in the early 90s, when membership was down to 50 people, you still had over 30 teams in the shirt
Right.
sleeve.
Oh, yeah. We'd always have 40 to 50. I'd just take all I could get.
Okay.
And I'd figure out the draw after, 2-3 days before the Bonspiel. I'd start making the...
So a big contrast is as it is today, where we have, 200 members, give or take?
Yeah.
150 to 200
100,
members. And
But a smaller shirt sleeve comparatively.
Right. Well, we've been, and it's been slowly happening. The Canadian curlers have not come down like they used to. And the Canadian dollar has always been a factor, but even when it was poor, they would still come. But that hasn't happened as much lately. And curling in Canada, I think, has kind of gone into the big cities now. I don't think the smaller towns are as successful or have as many teams or
You see a lot of the smaller towns are losing their rinks just because of upkeep costs. And,
right,
and
yeah,
stuff.
they got the
getting
same
hard.
problem with 50 members. They're not going to be able to keep it going.
Yeah.
And so that's changed. The shirt sleeve has been kind of unique as I've been thinking about it. Our international Bonspiel, which was usually the second week in March, would be a lot more competitive, we'll say. Teams, fairly good, well-known Canadian teams would come to play in that. That was a very tough Bonspiel to win. They'd come down with, out of the 48 teams, there'd be 20 to 25 teams that were very competitive in U.S. or Canada circles. Even our local teams would load up. We'd have, wouldn't take your league team into that.
An all-star team.
You'd find
Super
4
team, yeah.
4 skips might get together and curl. That was your playoff caliber team.
Got it.
Play in that one. The shirt sleeve, however, has always been more of a end of the year fun spiel. Club teams, even the Canadian teams. There have been many good teams that would come down. A lot of really well-known Canadian competitive curlers would come to that, but not with their competitive team. They'd come with their buddies or their league team or their friends from home, and so they were good curlers. They just weren't coming as a competitive team. And they weren't here necessarily. They were. It was easy for them to curl well.
Yeah.
But that wasn't their main focus of being here.
It was never a cash spiel, right? You said we went from electric appliances to the Morelli sponsorship.
Right. Yeah, we've never done. We have done a cash spiel in the past, and the cash spiel now I'm going to express an opinion. But over the years, there's been cash spiels in the U.S. and all over, and that kind of killed the bond spiels because.
Sure.
It was more serious then, and so you wouldn't see somebody take a new curler to a Bonspiel because you're talking
you wanted
cash.
to win.
Yeah.
And so it hurt the Bonspiel numbers because it dwindled down to the 4 skips would go.
Yeah.
It wouldn't take a couple new curlers or a second-year curler to go to Grafton or Devil's Lake or somewhere because it's cash, or up into Canada to go curl. It wasn't the same feeling. So the cash spiels made it easy to run it. You didn't have to go buy prizes, but I think in the end it hurt curling, and I think it hurt Bonspieling.
It kind of took the fun away from it a little bit for some of the curlers.
Exactly right. So the shirt sleeve, I guess the feeling about the shirt sleeve has always been it's a fun event, plenty of good curling. If we can make the ice really good, people enjoy it. We give them things to do here, and the uniqueness of our facility being able to one-stop shop, we'll say. They can come and curl, they can have some fun, we'd have music, we have dances, we have food.
I love that we do the dances.
We have people stay around the curling club. you guys that have probably gone to bonspiels in other places.
Just
where,
curling.
You better like cards
Where
or
you
dice
curl,
or something.
well, you
yeah.
curl, and then you go somewhere else with your team, and go somewhere else, whether it's shopping or to a bar or somewhere else to eat. And then it's we got to go back and curl now. You show up at the club, you curl, then you get out of there right away.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing about our bonspiels that made it so popular, especially for the Canadians, they weren't done like that in all the places in Canada. They were more competitive sometimes, or they would be more structured, and they didn't hang around the place. And we made it easier for them to stay here and have a good time and not
Yep.
spend as much
Yeah,
money as
yeah.
they normally do. So that was what made them popular.
Well, to the point where I think some of the other events in town start dropping by the shirt sleeve to a good time. And we've past couple of years have had the amateur basketball tournament, and I think we've started to see a couple amateur basketball players down here instead of their own.
That's certainly
Yeah, the word gets out, and
Yep.
obviously in the years when we were curling till 3 or 4 in the morning, there wasn't much else going on in town at that hour.
true.
Right.
Not that anything bad happens after midnight, but sometimes not anything good happens after midnight.
I always try to tell new curlers, I was just doing it here tonight in the military league with some people watching, and that maybe first year curlers, I was like, if you want to just swing in this weekend, it's free. I think it's a great look at like a traditional bonspiel, a fun one. It's a good look for curling. So I try to get people to come to that. Like, if you're going to experience it, this is what I think of when I think curling.
Yeah, and I feel a little bad because we've, in the years that we'd have 5 bonspiels, we got out of the habit of going to other towns to curl.
Yep.
And it made it harder for us to go, for our members to see what real bondspieling was when you weren't working your butt off, cleaning ice and,
Right.
and running the food and doing everything else. So we kind of lost that. I feel bad that we haven't done enough of that to get our own members into other towns.
Yeah, and going forward, we have a couple of teams. I mean, we had Charlie on a few weeks ago, and I know he's trying to pick up a team to do it. I've done one a couple of years here.
We've chatted about it every year. It's just a timing thing that makes it tough.
We usually just have a couple of teams as opposed to a handful of teams.
Yeah. Like there was many years in some of our bonspiels where a group of 4 teams would come from one town, like Oxbow, just over the border here, less than 100 miles away. 4 teams would come down. There'd be husbands and wives and whatnot, and some curl together and some didn't, but they'd be here for the weekend.
Yep.
And that was a common thing. From one club, there'd be 4 teams would come.
This year was probably the best we've had since I've been here for traveling. I think we've had, Charlie sent a few down to Bismarck, a couple went down to Fargo. We had the girls teams go up to Fortuna.
Yeah.
So we've probably had a good 10 this year, and that's
starting to branch out
finally
a little more.
starting to pick up again.
Yeah.
Now we talked about some of the good years, obviously, when you had filling up 48 teams and having a waiting list and things like that. I think we're safe to say we're a year removed from COVID. How much do you think COVID affected the shirt sleeve with the Canadian teams and even just teams in town in general?
Well, it went more than 1 year. So the Canadian border rules were in place up until last fall, actually.
Yep.
It was very difficult for them to come down and get home again. So really that's been a 3-year effect of making it very, if not impossible, very, very difficult for a Canadian team to come down here and curl. So that stopped the Canadians a year of COVID. And it went for 2 more years. So this is really the first year that they can easily get down here.
Yes.
They've stopped all the restrictions at our border for sure, and even their ones going home was very restrictive, as you know.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to go home, you lived it.
Do the tests.
Yeah, and all that. So that hurt us a lot. Hopefully, I think it would take a little bit of marketing and maybe reaching out to some people in the Regina, Brandon, Winnipeg, Estevan, some of the Weyburn, to get some of those teams that used to come, remind them that we're still here, and we can still make it a good time for them.
And we should probably make it a point to return the favor as well.
Yeah.
Estevan, Weyburn, some of those, we need to get a team up there.
Oh yeah, I'm all for it.
Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned there was a couple of close calls with the shirt sleeve right before we started here. What are some of the crises that we've
Sure.
encountered throughout the years?
Well, we're dealing with, in some years it's the weather. We've had years obviously where it's 50, 60 degrees. So we've had to really work to keep the ice playable. We'd sometimes call it a rain delay. We'd have to go out and get water off the ice or scrape the walls and be here all night taking care of it to get it ready for the next day. That happens occasionally. Our plant and our floor now is pretty efficient, so we're likely in pretty good shape for most weather events now. But we did have a couple close calls. One year, I'm going to say it was like 95. We had an old compressor system that had, as we've often done, borrowed equipment from other places. We had two old compressor plants. One had come from the Bridgman Creamery that they'd used for many years and closed down, and the other one had come from, I think, like Cloverdale or somewhere like that. So those old York compressors were running, and they don't even make them anymore. So parts and things were impossible. Well, I got a call one Friday from Gordy Johnson, who was a fairgrounds manager who used to check on our plant, and said, we've got a problem. There's one of the rods has broken off in the main plant, and it cannot run. That was the 1st of March, and we would have had probably a 56-team Bonspiel coming in at the end of March to save our year. So, as it happened, the U.S. National Mixed was being held in Bismarck at that time. So a lot of our members were down there watching that. So I was here. Gordy called me, so I got calling around to ice compressor companies, and Simcoe is the main one in Winnipeg. They're headquartered in Toronto, and they had a plant that we could buy, and we'd have to get it down here. So I called the people that were down in Bismarck. We kind of had an over-the-phone board meeting, and got this plant coming our way. So then we had to get it shipped from Toronto to Winnipeg. We had one of our members had a day or two off, so we paid his way to go up to Winnipeg with a flatbed trailer, load this thing on. In the meantime, we had Huey, the house mover from Minot here, come and start taking the old plants out of that plant room. We had to pour some cement footings for that. We had to cut all the pipes off. Craig Nathan was in there with his welding arc welder, cutting all the pipes off, emptied that room completely while this machine was on the road coming down.
Yikes.
It got to the border. We had to call customs brokers to get it lined up so they could get it across the line. We got it into town. We lifted it on this. If you think of those single cranes, that go up like this. Well, they were doing it horizontally across the ground with this thing dangling from it by chains through that door. Through the outside door, hanging it in as it rolled in. We had big roller pipes that they'd set it on, and we had to lift it up onto this new pad that we just poured. And Craig Nathan was a master welder, and he was pre-welding. He had the diagrams of what it was going to look like. He was pre-welding all these pipes all the way around there. And if you know welding around a round pipe, it's easy to miss a spot. He didn't miss a spot. We didn't have a leak anywhere. They set that plant in there. He finished up hooking up the pipes, and we fired it up about 10 days before the Bonspiel. The ice had gotten a little
mushy.
Well, yeah, it got kind of porous, we'll say, and it was losing the paint color and all that. So, but we got the floor cooled down. We put a couple floods on it, and we got it going, and we saved the Bonspiel and saved our year, and probably saved our club.
Right.
Yeah,
but it was just a fluke. They had a plant sitting there. They could get it shipped to Winnipeg within 5 days. So that was about the 7th of March. We got it to Minot about the 15th or 18th of March, and we got it installed and got it running by about the 20th. And
you were curling on
we
Friday.
were curling on the 30th. Yeah. So
Wow.
that was a close call, and that was really a big issue for the club. Well, then a few years after that, the brine pump, which is the thing that pushes the coolant through the
Smaller one.
that blew up, and the impellers, and so you couldn't get another one of those in place in time. So that's where we got looking for some type of a pump, and Tobin Taft found one in a snowbank in a tree row south of Minot. Wheeler Contracting, I believe it was, that had it.
Wow.
It was a big water pump that you'd use to empty a stock pond or something, I suppose. And we hooked that up, but it was a gas-operated deal. So we had to keep coming down here every 6 hours and refilling the gas. 24 hours a day to keep that thing running. And we had big 8-inch pipe on the ground coming from that thing. So
For the exhaust?
No, that was the brine would go out through it and come back in. So we had it coming out of the headers.
Oh,
And
okay.
we were bypassing the whole, to push it through the coolant system and then back under the ice. And so that was running for, a week or more. And again, saving the ice. And it was a fairly warm time at that point. So we got through that week and shut it off. And we got in a little trouble because when all that, those days we were using brine, all the brine dumped out and killed all the grass on it. So not only did we have to pay to rent the deal, we also had to pay for Cashman to resod the whole side of the curling club building, because the fair they like to have nice green grass during the fair. And
That's where all the hot tubs go.
Yeah. And so that was an adventure that a gift that kept giving.
It's
90s sounded rough.
only in curling do you hear stories like that,
Right.
eh? Like
We just had the perfect storm of members who could do things like that.
Right.
That, like personally, I wouldn't have clue one. I don't even know how to, turn on the pump. But these guys understood what we needed. They knew what to look for. They called around. I mean, it was just a combination of people pitching in and getting it done. We paid for it all the time. We didn't, the only time we had to borrow money in recent years when we overhauled that plant for the first time after it had been in place for about 10 years. We had to replace the chiller that was leaking. We had to do some other stuff. The ammonia tank was no good. Had to completely overhaul it. So we did have to borrow $30,000 one year to get it all going again. That was in the early 2000s, and over the years we kind of saved it that way too.
So over the 60 plus years that the shirt sleeve has been going on, obviously there's been good stories like that, saving the Bonspiel and the club, like you said. You've had a lot of curlers come from both Canada and the U.S. Any memorable celebrity curler appearances that you might remember?
Well, some were curlers that did well after they left here, and some that had been really famous curlers before they got here. Ernie Richardson and his rink were 4-time world champions from Regina. Ernie would come, not with his competitive team, but he would come down and curl several times. Another gentleman by the name of Bob Pickering was a Canadian Saskatchewan champion many times. The Campbells that went with them were from Saskatchewan. We've had a few American curlers that have been here that some were as juniors that later on went on to do something more than that. We had the state in the old days. North Dakota used to have its own state playdowns, so we would host that on a rotation probably every 10-12 years. So I remember in 1965 there was a curler from Minot on the team from Fargo. It was actually a dentist from Moorhead, and they won the U.S. They won the North Dakota, and then they went and won the U.S. And it was actually the first time curling was ever in Sports Illustrated, because the guy was real loudmouth and he was like, he was like the Muhammad Ali, I'm the greatest, we're going to do everything. Nobody does that in curling.
Right.
And he did. And so it got noticed, and they went to the world, and the third for him was a fellow from Minot, actually, Tom Fitzpatrick.
Okay. That's
And so that was one of the curling names in Minot from way back. And so I remember that, and I remember seeing it, and then he disappeared after that. Not only as a curler, but as a dentist, I never did see him again. I know his office was in Moorhead. I remember where it was, and he disappeared. But he wouldn't come to a Bonspiel necessarily, but he did curl here. Yeah.
So obviously Bob Labonte curled here for many years, and we've talked. I'm pretty sure we talked about the Curse Labonte and went over that story. If not, it's been shared many times. Did you curl on Bob's team? Did you travel with him to a couple? Or?
Oh yeah, that was kind of another story. And even in the Bonspiels here, Bob was he was actually our club manager for a few years when he was going to school here.
In fact, I think I still get his mails sometimes.
Yeah, he came to Minot he came to Minot to go to college.
Okay.
And so while he was going to Minot State, he'd work in the railroad in the summer, like on a road crew.
Yep.
And then he'd go to school in the winter, and he'd be the club manager, and then we curled together. And so it was always a very common thing when I'd go somewhere with Bob, whether it was in Canada or wherever. Before the game, you're shaking hands and introducing yourself, and Bob Labonte, good curling, and I'd be behind him, and the guy would shake his hand and then kind of go, look, like, did he say Bob Labonte?
That Bob?
And I'd kind of shake my head and go, yeah, that's
he
him.
did.
That's him.
And so that happened many times, and so then they'd all want to talk to him about it. That's a whole other story of his history.
What event was that?
World Championship.
That was World Championship.
Yeah, the final game of the World Championship in 1972, so it's 51 years ago. And he was like he always says, if he was a bull rider, he would have got the gold medal. He was a champion for 8 seconds.
Yeah, right.
Champion for 8 seconds.
And then the rock was kicked, and that was the end of it.
That was the end of that.
I think it's funny that
And more famous for that, probably.
Yeah.
Bob's got a couple of my favorite shirt sleeve memories here too. One of them is my first year here because I'd only lived in town for like 3 months, and the shirt sleeve rolls in, and I'm sitting here. I'd been curling at the club as an alternate. Got picked up on a team, and then Bob walks in. Never seen him before in my life. Goes up to the stand there. Who was the gal that would sing for us? Melissa Spelchin. Yeah. So he goes up and grabs Spelchin's guitar and starts singing the My Little Beaver song and just belting it out. And then the next year I saw him, he'd pulled the little vent over in the walls there.
Yeah.
So we got the vents that go between the club room and the ice, and he grabbed a spray bottle and he was spritzing somebody. I don't remember who he was spritzing. He was spraying the spray bottle on somebody who was standing out there on the ice while they're curling.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of folks that came to the shirt sleeve many years in a row. From Winnipeg, Brandon, they used to come in groups. I have a lot of good memories of those names and those people, and they were really good, and they'd come back year after year and look forward to seeing them, and of course we've kind of lost some of that, but then again, I'm getting old and they probably don't remember me either.
Well, we're trying to get it started again. We'll see here.
Yeah.
So, one I was going to ask, one that we had a club history podcast a while back when we found the newspaper clippings, but I don't think we saw the one when the club location changed.
Sure.
What year was that?
We actually opened in December of 62.
62. That's the current fairgrounds location.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
When
so,
did they break ground on the building? How long?
Well,
did it
they
take?
probably did it that spring, so it would have been just that year.
Oh, okay.
They
Wow.
got it
Yeah.
up pretty fast. The Manson Construction built it. There's a little bit of a story to that if you look up by the beams up there, you'll see the 4 things. They were misdrilled originally, and so they misdrilled it or missized the building
Just
a
off
little
a
bit.
hair.
And so they had to re-drill those cross beams. But yeah, that was part of it, and it was really the cooperative effort between, at that time, the county fair, because it was not a state fair at that time.
Did not know that.
It didn't become the state fair till 1965, so it was a county fair at the time, and the manager of the fair at that time was a curler.
Okay.
And so they'd kind of work to deal with him to do a cooperative thing for this building. So it actually served. So that was in '62. Minot Curling Club paid for half the building, and we paid for all the ice making equipment and all that. The fair owned the building, so we had a 40-year lease, believe it or not. So that ended in 2002. And so during that time, though, it worked because they used the building as a commercial exhibit building, and then Tim Cashman used to rent it in the spring.
Yep.
And then we'd have it for our 6 months, and it was a really good cooperative deal. So now, go to the middle 70s, they decided to build a hockey rink in Minot. There was not an indoor hockey rink in Minot. So they used the cooperative thing that we did here, and they put the hockey rink on the fairgrounds.
Okay.
And the All Seasons Arena was built, thinking that hockey was a 6-month operation, and the fair was take it the rest of the year. Well, it turned out to work great for a while, but all of a sudden hockey started being more than a 6-month operation, and they needed more ice and they needed more time, and then that got to become kind of a headbutting thing over the years, and then they ended up moving the hockey away from the
fair.
And so it was the curling club before was really the idea behind that.
And
Sure.
can we circle that back to the article again from 1916 where they say like the Minot Curling and Skating Association is building a four-sheet curling club with a skating rink, and then they go on there like, and we're sure hockey is soon to follow because it was a new upcoming sport. So
Yeah.
so we had the first hockey arena because the curling club built it, and then we had the first indoor one because they followed our business model.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Yep.
And as you know, Wes, we've talked about it. We were the Minot Curling and Skating Association until I think '92. I changed the name
Yeah,
with
yeah,
the state,
yeah.
but
Yes.
but that was our official name for all those years. Not that we did anything with skating in my lifetime, but that was how they started back in the 20s there. And so,
And the original club, that was it was right on Burdick Expressway, right? That burnt down, or
no,
They had a
it's-
temporary one by
yeah.
the railroad.
They started with an outdoor. Well, first they started on the river.
on the river. Yep,
Then
we
they had a
talked
building
about
with
that.
no
one.
roof on it, down by the depots.
Yep,
Just
down
north-
kind of by
just
the
north
Barley
of the
Pop-ish
depot.
area.
Yeah. And that was kind of the temporary deal.
Yep.
And then the building that I remember as a kid, I was never old enough to curl it, but my dad did, was right north of the viaduct here by Eastwood Park.
Yep.
It was a big slope building and actually had 4 sheets of curling in the middle on this slope, and actually had room for 2 sheets on the outside. And originally it was natural ice. So they couldn't have a shirt sleeve bonspiel because they had to have their international in January.
Was it? It was a sand floor too.
It was a sand floor. Yep. It was only used for that. Well, then they would occasionally put ice on those outsides, so they actually could have done 8 sheets of curling ice there.
Wow, neighbors.
But they didn't do it very often because those outside sheets were a lot of work, and then it was kind of falling into the river on the north side.
Yep.
It was right on the river, and so that would. So that's how it was. But I remember there was no shirt sleeve, but they'd have the international because it was earlier.
Because it was in January or February.
Yeah.
And that structure no longer exists.
No, it after the curling club moved out of there and came down here to have a cement floor and a fixed
Yep.
building and all that, the was used for many years to store. I think Fisher Motors bought it.
Okay.
And they stored cars in there.
Okay.
And then I think it was at Christmas one year, the week between Christmas and New Year's, it burned. I remember driving with my parents up to the hill to watch it burn.
To see,
So
yeah.
I'm guessing it was in the late 60s or early 70s. I'm not exactly sure.
But it was
around.
after the curling club
Oh,
had
yeah,
already
we were
moved
gone.
out.
We were
Yeah.
long gone. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, talk about location changes and stuff like that. With this club being where it is, how much was the building itself affected by the floods, and did it ever play a factor in shirt sleeve play?
No, the
or
flood.
season
The
play?
flood. Well, the '69 flood was the first one. That happened in April, so we would have been just done with
Done,
our
yeah.
season right before it. I think the flood waters hit mine at about the 10th of April, if I remember right. I was a junior in high school then, so I remember not going to school for a month. But that we would have got through it that year. But the building would have been flooded, but not much. Maybe a foot of water in the building that year. 2011, there was 5 feet of water in here, and that's why, like, all of our compressors and our pumps and everything had to be rewound, and they had to rewire everything in the building because the water was above the panels of the electrical thing. So that was the worst one, and that one happened in June.
Right.
So you might, I don't know if you guys were around that year. We had
little
to-
bit.
We had to come down to the curling club. Like our rocks and everything were covered with mud in the rock room. Well, and we couldn't come down here. It was everything was restricted. Well, then we got a call one day. Hey, you guys got to come and take your rocks out of that room. We're going to clean that up. One of the companies would come. So we had to come down here on call around and get people at 6 o'clock to come down here that night and take all our divider boards, all of our curling rocks, all of our
Oh, yeah.
equipment. We laid it all out on the grass on the other end of the building. I think Nathan's hauled the rocks to their warehouse on a trailer, but all the divider boards were laid outside, and they stunk because they were mud covered and all
Yeah.
that. And they sat there for the summer. And then they finally got this. I don't think we got going that year till January. So that year we actually curled till the end of April.
Okay.
We went from January to April in 2011/12.
Yep.
And so that year we were still able to have the shirt sleeve. We had a league.
Barely, but yes.
We had a league that year, but we didn't make ice till Christmas.
Similar to the year after COVID, I would think.
Yeah.
Similar setup. I think we got started right around January for that as well.
Yeah, we did. It was right after the
Yeah.
New Year.
Yeah, we were getting ready in November, and then they had a second shutdown.
Yep.
And then we stopped making ice and waited till,
Yep, that's right.
Right. So, I mean, we've had our ups and downs over the years. I guess that's just stories that we'll remember. Some of us will remember later.
Yeah.
Yeah, kept it going. Did the floor need work after the?
We got a new one, didn't we?
I thought we got a new floor on
that's
there.
a different. The first floor that was put in '62 was pretty good. The flood maybe affected it some, but I think my theory always was there was a time that Ike Keatings would bring in flatbed trucks full of carpet and back them in there and have a carpet sale, like a garage sale here. And I think the weights of those things coming in the spring when it was just thawing out
During road restrictions.
would cause the floor to crack. So we were always fighting sheet 6, and we were always there was cracks all over the floor. So
We'd run brine through that too, right?
we did.
And
The brine didn't hurt us, but we had to replace the header pipes. But but the original pipes are still there actually.
they're underneath.
They're underneath
because they just added concrete.
So I forget the year. I'm going to say 15 years ago, maybe. There was an opportunity. I'd been checking with companies around the country about replacing the floor and how to do it. And to chop out the floor and all those old pipes and stuff was a really expensive thing. But I found a company that said, no, we can just go right on top of that old one.
Yeah.
So they brought in layers of stuff and smoothed it out, and then they put the pipes in. At the same time, the city of Minot had some money that they were going to use for facilities. So it's the only time in my life I've been to city council meetings. I went to 4 or 5 of those. We did an application for funds from the city, and the city funded us through the state fair as an owner of the building $200,000 to replace the floor and all the pipes and the headers.
Yeah. I guess I didn't remember that tip.
And so that was that saved our floor, kept us going for another several years. Obviously now the first one lasted probably 40 years, 45 years, and then we've had this one now for 15 or 20. I think it was 2007. But
Before they redid that floor, there was still a channel underneath the boards, right? Because you used to heat and scrape that water off into that trough, and then
yes, well, and there's still one here today. We just don't use it. And the home end where the headers are, they call them, the pipes where the brine comes through and then it goes out into the pipe.
But you can still see.
those so
you
those
lift
boards
up,
still pop up.
You can lift them up
okay.
and see it. We did have a few years where some pipes would plug because of the brine that we used to use, which is a calcium chloride mixture, like they use in tractor tires and whatnot. That's what the coolant we used for many years. Well, that would eventually created a slime and a shale in those pipes because they'd be shut down all summer. That would dry in there, and that eventually those pieces started clogging up. So we'd have plugged pipes. So we had many of them. So we'd come in through the end here. We'd pull the plug, we'd get our faces sprayed with whatever it was in there. And then we'd have to cut the pipes and redo them and rehook them to that header. We'd have to run water through there to try to push all the sludge out of there and then reattach them while the thing was running. So it was not much fun crawling around and doing that, but we did that a couple of years because of the plugged pipes, and that's what led us to replacing the floor. Was we had some plugged pipes we couldn't clean out. We did switch when we overhauled the plant in the early 2000s. We switched from that calcium chloride to glycol. So the glycol is not as caustic to anything. Yeah, it's ethylene glycol. No, I think
Propylene?
Propylene glycol.
Yeah, I've
but
always
it's a
heard the
certain
issue
kind.
with the brine is like you get a little bit of air in it too.
Yeah.
Any air and like you
Then
got all
it
that
rusts.
salt and it just rusts
Yeah, it
immediately.
looks like rust.
Where
So-
with the glycol you can have air in the system and just kind of bleed it
So
every
that
now
was
and
a
then.
savior when we switched to the glycol.
Oh, we are over 40 minutes. We're almost
Holy
45.
smokes, yeah.
So.
I figured that would happen with this one.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. It's good.
I guess real quick, one of your favorite moments, whether it happened on the ice, if it's a funny story, or happened in the lobby during shirt sleeve.
If I don't hear it, I'm going to ask about one. Go ahead.
Well, here's one. I had a good friend of mine from Tisdale, Saskatchewan, who had come down many years, and he had trouble controlling his alcohol intake. And actually, he's a dentist. Red hair, flaming red hair. Great guy. I used to go up there to hunt with him. And we also had a member, Frank Shipley, who was a surgeon here in Minot. So Teddy had an incident where he fell, I think in the kitchen, and hit his head on the old stove we had in here and cut his head. So it's bleeding like crazy, as you know. And he doesn't feel a thing, but he's bleeding. And so we're like, hey, we got to fix you up here. You know, we're going to have to take you in. And your blood's so thin. You know, he hadn't slept in 3 days. He hadn't stopped drinking the whole time. What are we going to do? We get Frank Shipley decides to fix him up. So he looks at him. He's got this big gash. And he just starts taking his hair and tying it together on either side of the gash to pull it together.
His own hair, yeah.
He used his own hair to stitch him up. All right, go ahead, Ted.
Oh, God.
Oh, boy.
God.
Oh, what a fix that would be. That's too funny.
That's better than
We
I
should have
was
done that
gonna
with
ask about.
Plemmel when he cracked his face out there.
No, we won't.
Hold still.
Well, was that the story you were looking to hear?
No, I heard about sliding down the stairs at one point.
Yeah, the chair or the stair surfing and table diving. Those were two of the Bonspiel traditions for a while. The table surfing was what you'd wait till somebody had a table like this full of beer cans and whatever beverage, and then without them looking, you'd take a run from across the room and head first dive and slide across the table, empty the table of everything that was on it into the laps. Onto the floor you'd go and crawl underneath and kind of get up and go, what happened? And then we would...
At least there was an etiquette.
And then we'd try to... Yeah, the stair surfing, I still think that's probably why I had to have my knee repaired.
I think I'd been told when table surfing was popular, I was told that there was a Canadian team that had gotten it done to them like 3 times that year, and like by the 3rd time they came around, they just picked up their drinks, leaned back, and they didn't even give them a second
They
look.
just keep their hand on their drink, and if they saw it coming, they just pull it back. It was just like, a train crossing.
Wes, you may have tried that once, but I think you went the wrong way over the table.
Because I have no recollection of it, you're probably right. So.
Yeah, it's a long way
I
across
want
the
to go the long way,
table.
not the short way.
Oh, that's fun.
That's good.
That's fun. Well, we could probably wrap up then. You think if we're getting close to that 50-minute mark?
I gotta go do a championship presentation here in a few minutes.
Okay,
Well,
so yeah, we better
call it.
wrap her up. Mark, thank you very much for joining us. Again, the shirt sleeve kicks off this Friday, the 31st at 5 o'clock is the first draw. There will be 3 draws. I think we got 3 draws.
3 draws, yeah. The last
Friday
draw
night.
Saturday will be 9:15.
Okay, so 3 days of good curling, and we filled up, so that's good to see.
Yep.
Other than that, good luck to the teams curling for city championships tomorrow night, and we'll be back with episode 16. Thanks, guys.
Bye.